the hospital corridor grew deathly silent as the relentless rhythm of the heart monitor filled the heavy air, and Shubh stood frozen in absolute disbelief while Dr. Naz rushed into the cabin with urgency written all over his face, demanding that everyone step back so he could examine the sudden vital spike of Shaon's father, whose lifeless hands had miraculously twitched just moments prior, causing Shubh's heart to hammer violently against his ribs as he pleaded silently for a miracle, because the thought of losing the older man whom he had grown to respect deeply felt like an unbearable weight crushing his chest. While just a few feet away, hidden behind the frosted glass partition, Shaon pressed her trembling palms against her mouth to stifle her sobs, her wide, terrified eyes locked onto the chaotic scene inside, where medical equipment flashed blinding white lights and the frantic shouts of the nurses echoed like distant thunder, driving her mind into a frenzy of desperate prayers and agonizing fear that her beloved father might slip away into the permanent darkness forever, leaving her completely alone in a harsh and unforgiving world, where every single safety net she had ever known was rapidly crumbling to dust under the heavy boots of fate and relentless tragedy. As Dr. Naz pressed the cold stethoscope against the patient's chest and adjusted the oxygen mask with trembling yet professional fingers, the entire room held its collective breath, waiting for the verdict that would either shatter their souls or grant them a fragile lease of hope. While outside the door, Shubh paced back and forth like a caged animal, running his fingers through his disheveled hair as tears welled up in his eyes, threatening to spill over at any second, because he blamed himself for the immense stress the old man had suffered leading up to this cataclysmic collapse, and he swore to himself that if fate gave them a second chance, he would protect this family with every ounce of his strength, regardless of the obstacles standing in their path or the bitter enemies lurking in the shadows waiting to strike at their weakest moment. Inside the sterile white confines of the intensive care unit, the digital monitors suddenly stabilized, emitting a steady rhythmic beep that signaled a miraculous return from the brink of death, causing Dr. Naz to let out a long, audible sigh of relief and turn toward the anxious faces pressed against the glass with a cautious yet reassuring smile that immediately melted away the suffocating tension in the room and sent a wave of pure, overwhelming gratitude flooding through Shubh's veins as he collapsed against the wall with weak knees, thanking the Almighty for answering his frantic prayers, while Shaon, who had witnessed the doctor's expression through the glass, felt the paralyzing grip of terror lift from her heart, allowing her to stumble forward and throw open the door, unable to contain her desperate need to see her father's face with her own eyes and confirm that he was truly coming back to them from the very jaws of the grave. As she rushed to the bedside, falling to her knees and grasping her father's frail, warm hand, tears of pure joy streamed down her flushed cheeks, while the old man slowly fluttered his heavy eyelids open once more, revealing a gaze filled with deep love and profound exhaustion that spoke volumes without a single word being uttered. In that sacred moment, the entire universe seemed to shrink down to the four walls of that hospital room, where father and daughter were reunited against all odds, while Shubh watched from the doorway with a tender, protective smile, realizing that the storm had finally passed, and a new dawn of hope and healing was about to rise over their lives, forever changing the trajectory of their destinies in ways they could never have imagined. As the medical team quietly packed up their instruments and stepped out to give the family some privacy, Shaon whispered words of endless love into her father's ear, promising him that everything would be alright, and that no harm would ever touch him again. While outside in the dimly lit hallway, the shadows seemed a little less menacing, and the future a little brighter, proving that resilience and unconditional love could indeed conquer even the darkest nights of the soul.
As the initial wave of overwhelming relief slowly washed over the sterile hospital room, and the steady rhythm of the heart monitor continued to reassure everyone that the worst crisis had finally passed, Shaon carefully wiped the remaining tears from her flushed cheeks while leaning in closer to whisper gentle, comforting reassurances into her recovering father's ear, ensuring he felt completely safe and surrounded by unconditional love after such a terrifying brush with mortality. While just a few feet away near the doorway, Shubh stood quietly with his hands tucked into his pockets, watching the tender reunion unfold with a profound sense of peace and redemption flooding his soul. Because knowing that the old man was going to survive brought an end to the suffocating guilt that had been tormenting his conscience ever since the tragic events of the previous night pushed the family to the absolute brink of total destruction. But even as the immediate panic subsided and the hospital atmosphere grew calmer, a sharp knock echoed against the half-open wooden door, drawing everyone's attention toward the entrance, where a stern-looking hospital administrator, accompanied by two burly security guards, stood waiting with an official clipboard and a cold, bureaucratic expression that instantly shattered the fragile tranquility of the moment, causing Shubh's protective instincts to flare up immediately as he stepped forward to block any potential threat, demanding to know what business they had disturbing a recovering patient at such a delicate hour. While the administrator adjusted his glasses and spoke in a harsh, unsympathetic tone, explaining that according to strict hospital policy and unpaid medical bills amounting to a staggering sum, the family was required to clear the pending dues immediately or face immediate discharge of the patient, regardless of his unstable medical condition. A cruel ultimatum that struck Shaon's heart like a bolt of lightning, because she knew very well that their meager savings had already been completely exhausted during the previous weeks of emergency treatments, leaving them utterly penniless and completely vulnerable to the merciless pressures of a system that cared more about currency than human life. While the frail old man, upon hearing the commotion, weakly tried to sit up in bed and muttered apologetically in a raspy voice, telling his daughter not to worry about him and that it was time for him to let go, rather than become a lifelong burden to her and Shubh, who had already sacrificed so much of their own peace and happiness trying to keep the family afloat through endless trials and tribulations, which only made Shaon shake her head fiercely as she clutched her father's hand even tighter, refusing to entertain such defeatist thoughts, while Shubh stepped up to the administrator with a fierce determination blazing in his eyes, making it crystal clear that he would move mountains and fight tooth and nail before letting anyone throw a recovering patient out onto the cold streets, promising to settle every single penny of the debt before the sun rose the next morning, even if it meant selling his own soul or confronting the ruthless moneylenders who had been terrorizing their neighborhood for months, casting a long, dark shadow over their lives and setting the stage for an even more intense confrontation in the days to come.